The instant the truck door swung open, the cold rushed inside like something alive, sharp, invasive, merciless. It sliced through the cab and wrapped itself around everything it touched. But it wasn't the freezing air that made the Navy SEAL stop breathing. It was what stood just beyond the open door. A large German Shepherd was frozen in the snow, her body stiff and unmoving, her dark coat dusted white by relentless snowfall. She stood tense but silent, and pressed tightly against her legs were two tiny puppies, so close they looked almost fused to her, trembling uncontrollably. Their eyes were wide with fear, far too young and fragile to survive a storm like this on their own. He had driven this mountain road more times than he could count during training rotations. It was usually empty, quiet, forgotten. But tonight, the storm had erased all familiar shapes, turning the world into a blur of white chaos. When his headlights caught those figures on the roadside, something deep inside his chest tightened in a way combat never had. The dog didn't bark. She didn't growl. She didn't retreat when he stepped down from the truck. She simply watched him. Eyes dark, alert, filled with exhaustion, fear, and a fierce determination that made one thing clear: she would not move. Not without her puppies. Not even for warmth. Before we continue, don't forget to tap the like button if this story resonates with you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a perfect moment. That small click makes a huge difference for us. Share your thoughts in the comments. We truly value your feedback. Now back to the story. He raised one gloved hand slowly, palm open, a gesture he had learned long ago when words were useless. He spoke softly, his voice steady despite the howling wind, telling her she was safe, that she didn't need to fight anymore. He knew animals didn't understand language the way humans did, but they understood intent, tone, patience. Snow clung to her whiskers. One of the puppies let out a weak, pitiful whimper. The sound was barely audible, thin and fragile, and that's when he noticed the shift. The shepherd lowered herself just a little more, shielding them with her body. Not aggressive, just desperate. He stepped back into the truck and opened the passenger door wide, allowing warm air to spill out into the storm. The interior light cast a gentle glow across the snow. Then he waited. He resisted every instinct to rush her. Trust couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. Minutes passed. The wind screamed. His fingers went numb. And then, finally, the shepherd took a cautious step forward. She paused, eyes locked on him, evaluating him the same way he had assessed threats throughout his entire career. Another step, then another. She stopped at the edge of the open door. Warmth brushed her face, and for the first time, her composure cracked just enough for him to see how close she was to collapse. He dropped to one knee in the snow, making himself smaller, less threatening. He tapped the seat gently. Not a command, but an invitation. What he didn't know, as the dog hesitated between warmth and survival, was that this single moment, this simple act of opening a door in the middle of a storm, would change far more than one frozen night on a forgotten road. The German Shepherd finally moved forward, not because she fully trusted him, but because her puppies could no longer endure the cold. As her front paws touched the truck floor, one puppy stumbled, legs shaking, and collapsed against her chest. That moment forced a decision no mother should ever have to make in the middle of a blizzard. He reacted instantly, slow, deliberate movements. He pulled a thick blanket from behind the seat and spread it across the floor. The fabric soaked up melting snow as the warmth of the cab surrounded them. The shepherd nudged her puppies onto the blanket one by one. And as she did, he saw her shoulders drop slightly, as if the battle had finally loosened its grip. She climbed in last. Before lying down, she turned and looked at him. Her eyes searched his face with unsettling intensity, as though she needed to memorize him, to decide whether this was safety, or just another cruel trick the world liked to play. Then she curled her body tightly around her puppies, still shielding them. Even now, even here, he closed the door slowly, sealing out the cold. For the first time since stopping, he allowed himself a deep breath. He leaned his forehead briefly against the steering wheel as emotion hit harder than any mission ever had. As the heater roared to life, the puppies began to stir. Tiny tails twitched. Soft whimpers turned into faint squeaks. One of them crawled unsteadily toward his boot, pressing its nose against the leather, drawn by warmth. Something inside him broke open. Something he hadn't realized had gone numb years ago. He had seen loyalty on battlefields, courage under fire, sacrifice measured in blood and silence. But this quiet resilience, this mother who chose to face a snowstorm rather than abandon her children, felt just as heroic. He drove slowly down the mountain, hazard lights blinking through the snow. Every few seconds, he glanced over to make sure they were breathing, still warm, still real. When the shepherd finally lifted her head and rested it against the seat, closing her eyes for the first time, he knew she had made a choice, not just to accept help, but to trust him with what mattered most. At a small roadside veterinary clinic, long after closing hours, he knocked until a light came on. When the veterinarian saw the bundled family in his arms, there were no questions, only action. Hours later, as dawn softened the storm outside, the puppies slept in a heated enclosure, full bellies rising and falling. The shepherd stood beside him, no longer afraid. Her tail brushed against his leg as if it belonged there. When the vet said they would survive, that they had been minutes from freezing, his throat tightened again, this time with relief. He knelt, met her gaze, and whispered a promise he hadn't planned to make. She would never be alone again. Her fight was over. When he finally left the clinic, sunlight breaking through the clouds, he didn't leave empty-handed. Because some rescues don't end in goodbyes. They end with a family, formed in the most unlikely moment. Simply because one man chose to open a door and one brave dog chose to walk through it. If the story touched your heart, don't just scroll past it. Share it with someone who believes in loyalty, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Let this moment be heard. Tap the like button if you believe every hero deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment if you've ever loved an animal like family. And don't forget to follow or subscribe for more powerful true stories that stay with you long after they end.